Okay, we are officially recording. I once thought that I clicked record and then spent an entire event not recording. Really good conversation. So it's always important to double check that. Welcome to everybody joining today. My name is Jonathan Cohn. I'm the policy director with Progressive Massachusetts. We're glad to have you here if you've been to many of our events or if this is one of your first events with us. And we're excited to have a discussion this afternoon on on youth engagement. I'm delighted to hand over the mic. It feels weird saying that for a Zoom event momentarily to Suravi Bhatia, who's been working with us for the past few months as a fellow with the CARE program, kind of the Coalition for kind of anti-racist education. That we have a number of members of our organization actively involved who've done a lot of great work, both in terms of legislative advocacy as well as creating pipelines of engagement for young people across Massachusetts. Survey will be kind of facilitating the panel, including like students from both Massachusetts as well as across the country who've been engaged in a lot of impressive advocacy work and kind of digging deep into like what animates people to get involved and not only get involved themselves, but to continue to expand the number of people like doing the work. And it's a lot of really impressive work that they're doing. As I noted, we will be recording. And during this presentation, if you have any questions at all, drop your questions in the chat. If when we go to a Q&A at the end, feel free then you can use the hand raise function. But Melanie O'Malley, my coworker, and I will be moderating the chat throughout. So, Siri, let me bring you on screen to add you on Spotlight. And then if you want, read off and I'll spotlight all of the people in order for the panelists for today. And feel free to say any opening words before you start introducing the panelists.
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. It is so great to see you all here today. And I'm very happy that you all took the time to come here on a Saturday. My name is Suravi Bhatia, and I'm a senior at Acton Boxford Regional High School. I'll be heading off to Harvard University in the fall to study government. And for the past couple of months, like John said, I've been working with CARE as a fellow through the Coalition for Anti-Racist Education. So some of the work I've been doing in the past is related to educational equity, and I'm so happy to continue doing that type of work with CARE to continue bringing youth voices into the spotlight. So I have some amazing panelists here today who I am very lucky to call my friends and my colleagues in advocacy. And I am so excited for all of you to get to learn more about them and their passions and what they believe in. So I would really like to get started so that we have lots of time for you all to ask questions later and, really get into the meat of our discussion. So yeah, I'm going to pass it on over to our panelists to introduce a little bit about themselves. So I would like to ask the panelists to
Let me put
introduce.
everybody on
Okay.
Spotlight.
Oh, for sure. All right, I'll wait for that.
And Anna, I don't. Anna, if we need video for people to spotlight people, but if because I know that she's feeling sick, if her voice can still be fine.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So okay. So everybody, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. Like I said, I'm Survey, and I'd like each of you all to say your name, the state you're from, and some sort of fun fact about yourself, whatever that might be. We can start with Obey.
Good afternoon, everyone. My real name is Oluebube, but you all can call me Obe. I'm from Massachusetts, and a fun fact about me is that I've been dancing for over 12 years.
Yeah, I can go next. Hi, everyone. My name is Dominic Mimbang. I am from Douglas, Georgia, heading to Harvard with Suravi to study social studies in the fall. And a fun fact about me is that I'm fluent in Italian and French.
I'll go next. Hi, my name is Kate Ramsey. I'm from Austin, Texas. And I guess a fun fact about me is I'll be going to George Washington University this fall to study political science.
I'll go next. My name is Karyleni Alburquerque. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, and I guess a fun fact for me is that I'll be heading over to DC with Kate as well, except I'm going to American University, majoring in communications, legal institutions, economics, and government.
Yeah, I can go now. Hi, everyone. My name is Bhavika Kalia, and I'm from Somerville, Massachusetts. And my fun fact is that I've been rollerblading ever since I was 5.
So clearly, age-wise, I'm an outlier here. I've been very politically active.
All right, thank you so much. Everyone, for now, we're just gonna have the panelists speak, and then there will be time later for a Q&A session. But thank you so much for your interest in participating. All right, so moving on to our first question for the evening. I want to get to know a little bit more about our panelists. What was the moment or issue that first drew you to advocacy work? So that might be a personal experience, a community need, or something else altogether that really inspired you. Let's start with Obe again and go in the same order as the introductions.
Thank you, Survey. To be honest, I feel like my journey in advocacy work has been like all over the place. I don't feel like it really started until when I was in high school. I know that Mod UN is a very common club in all over the country, but that definitely started my advocacy work because just by joining this club, I was able to immerse in many different topics. And joining Mod UN at my school, I was able then to branch off into the multicultural club because I go to a predominantly white school. So there was a need to have this sense of diversity, and which is where I helped create fashion shows, and for people who are recently moving to America to have a space where you're like welcome and free. And it's really that place that also like garner this place for me in order to start advocacy work. As well, with these programs, I was able to also immerse into when I first learned about the Black maternal mortality rate, which is something that has been very important to me and something I continue to go to in college. And just learning from that and realizing the disparities within that has definitely led a stretch into my advocacy work.
Yeah, truly, that's amazing, Ove. So for me, I would say my advocacy journey started when I first moved to the United States. So for some background context, I was born in Washington, D.C., and then I was raised in Italy for about 7 years of my life up until I moved to the U.S. And I came to the United States only knowing Italian and French. And moving to a rural town in Southeast Georgia that was predominantly white, I definitely stood out like a sore thumb. And not only going through a lot of the, I guess, societal differences that I was going through as an African immigrant. But also with the linguistic differences that I was going through, still adjusting to learning English in a school setting that was a Title I school setting that didn't really have enough funding for ESOL students. As I started to graduate from the ESOL program, and as I started to, find my way through, to, to, to sort of find my way through rural Georgia, I really wanted to. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry. I'm having a bit of an. Sorry about that. As I started, yeah. So, as I started to make my way through that, I kind of wanted to become the representation that I never had growing up, and that's truly been through starting Knowledge Empowers, where I work with ESOL and immigrant youth in my community to host leadership financial literacy workshops, or through a lot of my legislative and policy advocacy through serving as state vice chair of Georgia High School Dems, where I work uh, on advocating for education and racial equity policy. And through a lot of the different initiatives that I've started that deal with racial equity as well as immigration policy, I think it's truly been about not only becoming the representation that I never had growing up, but also wanting there to be pathways for immigrant and POC youth to really be able to define their own rarity without the arbitrary labels and stereotypes of others. But yeah.
I would say I kind of also don't have like a defining moment. However, I remember becoming probably the most politically engaged after the Uvalde shooting here in Texas, and gun violence becoming one of my major focuses. I remember I was in eighth grade and I attended my first political protest right after that at the Texas Capitol. I'm from Austin, so it's right in town, so I've been to plenty of protests down there. Um, but I remember that one specifically because I realized that, this idea of like, you don't have to care about politics, but politics will always care about you and affect you. And so that was kind of one of my main focuses. And then a lot of my advocacy has stemmed from me making personal phone calls to my representatives. I actually think it has made some change, even, sometimes it feels kind of repetitive when you call them every single day demanding the same thing. But I remember just of recently calling both of my senators all the time about specifically they want to build part of a border wall in a region of Texas that is oh my gosh, I think it's called, oh my gosh, I'm forgetting it because but it is a very, I've been there, it's great. um and I remember calling my representatives every day demanding that they don't do this, and they actually came out and said that they probably won't do it. So that kind of felt like a payoff in a way. And then education policy, I'm the daughter of an educator, so I've done a lot of stuff with calling my representatives. That's probably my biggest advocacy point, is trying to reach out to my representatives, emailing them, calling them, because that's the most important work. Is at the end of the day, they work for us, and if we don't make our voices known, they typically actually don't know. Even if you think it's common sense, they don't really know.
Thank you for sharing, Kate. I think that my advocacy journey began with two things. Firstly, I was really interested in the medical field at first. I really wanted to help people. But then I realized later down the road, this is just not going to do it for me. Not really interested in medical school. But then I joined a summer camp my freshman year of high school. It's called Anytown Leadership Camp, a nonprofit organization that teaches youth social justice issues and their role in becoming a leader in their community. And once I attended that camp, I realized that, okay, I can help people still, but I could just do it in a different way. So I really just switched gears from, being really interested in the medical field to being in politics. And yeah, and I'm focused mainly on healthcare, since that's also what really got me interested in the medical field, is my personal experience. Since I have lived almost my entire life with chronic illness, I now want to see how we can support folks who are navigating the healthcare system, not knowing how they're going to pay their bills, not knowing how they're going to keep food on their table because of how messed up our healthcare system is. So I really want to ensure that people have support in that area. And also education, that has become a focal point for me. I'm a fellow at All in Education, one of the youngest cohort members to ever be selected for the program. And there I focus on how to make education more equitable for Latino students.
Yeah, thank you so much. Everyone's advocacy journeys are so amazing. And I think for me, the moments or experiences definitely change with what specific area of advocacy. But I think I always like to talk about how I got into climate advocacy because that is a very big part of my life. And I think it definitely, there was a lot of experiences, but I think spending the summers in India, which is my parents' home country, as a child, was really where I was able to witness visible environmental issues. And I think a large part of that was just like seeing the large amounts of waste on the streets and just seeing how casually people treated pollution, really helped me understand how human actions were directly related to harm to the climate. Um, and I just saw how environmental issues and climate change specifically impacted people every day, and especially my own family in India. But when I returned to school in the US, I noticed that climate change wasn't, it was taught more of as an abstract concept that wasn't really impacting our lives. And that was just so crazy to me because I saw directly how it was impacting so many people, including my own family. So I noticed how a lot of my peers, they kind of lacked a sense of urgency or just empathy in general because being in Massachusetts, a lot of climate change, especially when we were younger, wasn't as visible and it wasn't something that we saw directly. So a lot of my peers didn't think it affected us. And I think that was really shocking to me because my family came from a place and I saw a place very often that was completely different and that was really being impacted. So I think just seeing that gap was kind of like the first part of was the initial part of my advocacy journey and just like identifying that issue and just wanting to raise awareness and like wanting my peers to understand. But I think it wasn't until sixth grade when I had a science teacher who was super passionate about climate change. And she brought that into the classroom. And then I realized how important climate education could really be. And ever since then, I've been interested in climate change and climate education specifically, and I've continued that throughout my high school experience. So I think just drawing on my experiences as a child and just where my family grew up and where I'm from really helped me identify why I want to do advocacy and why I continue to do advocacy.
Thank you all so much for sharing. I love learning more about you guys in this way. So to add on to that, another question that I have is, what challenges have you run into in your advocacy work? And if you did, how did you surpass them? And it's okay to share a challenge that you might still feel like you haven't surpassed or you're still looking for a solution to. Start again with Obey.
So yes, thank you. I think a lot of the challenges that come with this like sort of line of advocacy work is making sure that like especially in regards to disparities and diversity that like everyone's included. Definitely so. I remember specifically a scenario where basically I was a part of the Black Student Union in my school. We were hosting an event, and I remember that we were called to the principal's office because a white parent had felt that why was there a Black student union or that we're only excluding the club towards Black people. And so it had gone to the point that we had to make an announcement at the school that this club is for everyone. And I feel as though a specific challenge is understanding that having these lines of diversity is just a place for inclusivity. Like yes, we are the Black Student Union and we're focusing on discussions regarding Black people and Black struggles, but this is still a space for other people to come and listen in. And though I don't feel like the challenge in my school specifically is, I believe it's still relevant in the sense that many students do not understand that. I feel as though we are getting to a place where many people are understanding that and being able to be like welcomed in and be inclusive and understanding of the many different issues that us Black people and other many people of color are going through.
Yeah, I would say a challenge that I face, I honestly, I still kind of grapple with facing today in my advocacy journey is knowing, it is kind of like knowing how to stay grounded even within the face of, public setback or backlash. And what I mean by that is I've always kind of struggled in the line of like wanting to continue my work and be grounded in my convictions while also wanting my advocacy work to not be plagued by the negativity of the opposition in regards to it not affecting the communities that I was representing. So within Knowledge Empowers, as I said, it focuses on empowering immigrant and POC and English language learner youth within my community through leadership and financial literacy workshops. And one of the main events that we did, or one of the first events that we did, was a minority-owned businesses expo during Black History Month, where we were able to highlight Black and Brown owned businesses throughout throughout Black History Month, and we had a big expo to kind of like showcase all the businesses. And after I implemented that event, it was definitely a big step within my town that isn't used to having those, I guess, sort of race equity discussions. And I remember I was in the planning stage of next year's expo, and I got a message from somebody within my county, and this guy, I think he was a grade below me. He ended up sending me a video of Buffalo, New York supermarket shooting, which, unfortunately a gunman entered and, and targeted the lives of Black people within the supermarket and said, if you continue this, it's going to be you and, the rest of your group members, which obviously it was scary at the times having somebody kind of like threaten me in that way. And, I reported it to the school district. He ended up getting suspended for, I believe, about 3 days. And, I think that during the time, it was kind of scary for me to keep on going with my advocacy within knowledge and powers, because I was like, this is something that I'm passionate about, but I also don't want the people that I love in the community and, the individuals that I'm representing and trying to advocate for to be surrounded by this negativity and to have threats like this come their way. But I think that through not only finding community, but also, leading into like the adult resources that I had around me and making sure that, there were precautions set around to make sure that we were handling our advocacy with, the safe amount of, I guess, like the safeguards to make sure that threats like that couldn't really come our way or come to fruition, is something that I've started implementing within a lot of my advocacy, and also just leading with a message of empathy and kindness that, I'm always open to having open discussions about equity and, reaching across the aisle to this to, see what I guess like the opposition thinks. But where I will always draw the line is, the safety of those that I'm representing and that I'm working with. And I think that, holding that distinction near and dear to my heart, and keep, I guess, like keeping it as I go on, is something that is a way that I've kind of like worked that setback.
I'm so sorry that happened to you, Dom. I had no idea. Oh, am I frozen? Oh, okay. Sorry, I was frozen for a second, but so sorry that happened, Dom. I would say for me, the biggest difficulty is finding time. I'm a high school student about to go to college. When I'm not at school, I am doing a incredible amount of homework. And so it can definitely feel overwhelming at times, especially when it's like you've grown up being told to prioritize your future. But I also feel like advocacy work is prioritizing your future because you're working to, in a way, to ensure that your communities are safe and functioning and protective of everyone. So the biggest thing for me has always been trying to find time, especially when I'm stressed out. I'm about to graduate, so definitely feel like I have literally no free time ever. But one of the ways that like I'm able to ensure that I am advocating is again calling my representative. So that's like a small thing of advocacy I try to do every day.
Mine is kind of related to that. I struggle to find the energy. Like, I do have school, and then I have work, and then I have other responsibilities. I'm a big sister, so I mean, I have to take care of my other little sisters as well. And it's something that I've been struggling ever since I started high school, because I've been working since I was 14. So I've been having to manage that from very early on. And I have to say that it is very, very draining. But when I find myself in those moments where I tell myself, I'm so exhausted, I do not think I can do this anymore, um, I remind myself that the opposition relies on folks being exhausted. They continue to throw things at you, they continue to shut you down. And, there's so many things going on that kind of makes you feel like there's no way out. But that's exactly what the opposition wants you to feel like. They want you to feel hopeless, they want you to feel restless. And to that, you can resist by not giving up, by continuing to try and doing small acts of advocacy, like Kate said, calling your representatives. Even though they might seem small, they are impactful. And you can email as well, you can call, you can volunteer for a day out of the week. It doesn't have to be every single day, you just have to show up. And I cannot stress that enough.
Yeah, I think for me, a big challenge is actually feeling that hopeless feeling that you described before. And I think like a lot of the issues that we're addressing and advocating for are very large and can sometimes feel like almost impossible to solve in a sense. So I think a lot of times, like when I am or a lot of times in the past when I was doing advocacy work, it just felt so difficult to keep on going. And it felt like how am I actually going to make a difference? Because I think for me, a really big part of like why I wanted to go into advocacy was because I saw how so many different issues were affecting people that I knew personally, and I really wanted to help them. But sometimes I just felt like, how am I ever going to be able to help other people? So I think feeling that hopelessness was definitely difficult. But I think just learning like that the work you're doing is very important and that you can make such an impact was really helpful for me to overcome that. And I also think that something that was really difficult for me personally was actually identifying how I wanted to be an advocate and how I wanted to approach advocacy. And in the past, I would always say that I'm speaking for others, that or like I'm speaking for others who don't have a voice in certain issues or for people who are voiceless. And I believe that for a very long time. But I was able to attend an event where Congresswoman Ayanna Presley was speaking, and she shared something that really resonated with me, and that no one was voiceless, and that everyone does have a voice. And she really mentioned that being a true leader doesn't mean speaking up for others because you believe that they don't have a voice in an issue, but being able to support others and feeling confident and empowered to speak for themselves. So now when I approach advocacy, I always carry that belief with me, and that really helped me learn how to actually approach the issues and really wanting to get people involved.
Thank you, Bhavika, and thank you, everybody. I want to say, Bhavika, I really resonated with what you said about what the Congresswoman said. So, really great, and I love being able to hear more about that. So one other question I do have for you guys is, what is something you wish organizations like Progressive Mass understood about how people, young people particularly, view politics?
I think one thing like political organizations can also work with youth is like understanding that many youth don't seem to understand the power of their voice or the power of the little actions that they're doing. I've spoken to many people in regards to politics, and many people feel as though that, oh, it doesn't affect me right now, but they don't understand that it's not going to affect in the future. So I feel as though to have this like such a genuine like connection, I think understanding that youth right now may not seem interested, but if you like talk to them, talk about the current state, what things may happen or statistics that might happen later on, it might build to understand that, oh, I should be like involved right now. I know talking with many other people, especially my age or even younger, they don't seem to care. But when I talk to them in specific ways that I've done stuff or even small little impacts in communities, whether it's regarding to like diversity or the Black maternal mortality rate or all sorts of things regarding that, just by talking to them and seeing the impact and the things that you can do for many other people who are voiceless, it definitely helps understand that just the smallest conversations and making someone feel like they matter or that they're important is something that a lot of youth would like and definitely want to join such organizations just by getting that special feeling.
That is such an amazing point, Obe. And I think like I think I think what I'm about to say kind of like relates a lot to the point you just made. I think that often youth feel disconnected from policy conversations or just about how important certain issues that are ongoing in the world are. And I think I think like a big part of it is just because of just how drastically the flow of information has changed within this country. I mean, uh, our attention spans are going down with like TikTok and Reels, and I think that the way that a lot of us receive our information is it's a big shift and it's a big adjustment, and also the way that it's like it I think political organizations can definitely be much more intentional in trying to connect with youth in the way that they like give out information, because oftentimes youth can think that like, oh, like they can feel as if like the way that a political information organization is trying to display information to them, that that there's kind of like like that there's like a big knowledge gap within it, when oftentimes that's not the case. But just being more intentional with like connecting with youth, and also recognizing the new shifts and like how we take in information, also how we connect with others, and humanizing it more to really understand the perspectives of the youth that take in that information, to galvanize them, is a way to get youth more involved and more active in actively using their voice, for sure.
Kind of what Dom was talking about, like how the flow of information we get. As much as we don't want to admit it, a lot of youth find out about politics like through social media, like through TikTok, and through Instagram. Even if it kind of sounds sad, it's true. If I didn't set aside time for myself, to read the Associated Press every day, I would probably also be getting most of my information. And I think in a way it has kind of desensitized us to the extreme politics, right? Like the pre-Trump 2016 era, because things move so quickly. It's like we can't even focus on what happened. Like it used to be political scandals, like Obama wearing the tan suit was a political scandal. That wouldn't happen anymore just because of how fast paced we're moving. And so I think something that they need to acknowledge about youth is because of the fast-paced movement, you have to keep up or you're gonna fall behind. And as much as like, oh, that's like difficult and hard to accept, if we don't accept reality, we can't fight the issues at hand.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'm gonna go kind of back to what Dom was saying. There's absolutely like kind of a gap in knowledge in some way, but there's also a gap in power, or else I believe so. When I first started, I thought, I'm a student, I just started out. What type of power do I have? And I asked myself, what makes me qualified to fight alongside humanity? The answer is because I am human. And that the response remains the same for every single person. What makes you qualified to be an advocate is that you have your lived experiences and you can fight like hell for your community with those. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I just want to echo what everyone else was saying, and I think I definitely agree. I would also say that just drawing from my personal experiences, I think at first, when a lot of young people view politics, they may feel like they're not very able to get involved, or they're not really in a position to make change and lead change. And I think what I've realized over several years of doing advocacy work is that just the pure like power of student voice and the importance of student voice. And I've attended many like advocacy days and lobby days at like in the past at my state house, and attended like several board of health meetings and different things where we have state leaders and representatives involved. And every single time I've attended, I've always had someone like an adult tell me how important it was for me as a young person to be there. So I think that a lot of times young people overlook the importance of their own voice. And I think that's just a testament to how our society treats our young people. And a lot of times it feels like, that we're not able to have a voice because people don't believe that our voices have power. So I think that is a very unfortunate belief that I think a lot of young people share regarding politics, but I think that is definitely one we can overcome through just understanding the power of our voices.
Thank you, guys. All right, the next question I have for you that I know some of you have talked a little bit about earlier with some of the challenges you faced, but burnout is, of course, a very real challenge in advocacy work. So, as you're balancing your school and your jobs and organizing and all of the other responsibilities you have, what keeps you going? And we're also curious to know, what have you seen cause peers to become unmotivated if they might have been in the past?
So yeah, burnout is definitely something very real. As mentioned before, especially being a senior right now, you have your AP exams coming up, you have your homework from those said AP classes. All those things obviously definitely lead to such a burnout. And with that, in the sense though, I feel like the burnout for me, if I ever get it, it comes in waves. Like it's sometimes seeing something online that'll make you feel like, all this work I'm doing is for nothing, or seeing an action that someone does, oh, like, oh, well, what am I supposed to do now? It's things like that that cause that wave. But eventually I just remember the thing that like I'm doing for, and even this might seem cliche, just knowing that I'm helping other people, just knowing that I'm educating other people definitely brings me out of that burnout. I remember talking specifically to someone about the Black maternal mortality rate when I participated in a week of adversity about that during like last week, a few weeks ago. And I remember just talking about the details about the statistics about it, and them asking questions back to me, and me answering questions. It just reminds me of what I'm here for, what I'm trying to garner people for. And I know that with many other people who are in this line of work and advocacy in many other ways, I think what makes them unmotivated as well is just definitely seeing people's reactions. I know I've worked with my friends who participate in a thing called SALSA, Students Advocating Against like drug, substance, and all that sorts. And I'm seeing the rise in that, and seeing the casualness in schools or even outside of schools. It definitely makes them unmotivated, especially when I know when they went to like the state house recently, and I was unfortunately not able to because I had lost at that time. But they were going to the state house and they were talking with some of the congressmen, and one of the congress people that they were planning to speak with didn't even show up, didn't show any interest. Their office was very rude. Stuff like that definitely discourages people. And I was so glad to hear though that they were able to speak to someone else in the state house that was willing to listen to them, and then talk about their certain plans regarding that issue. So I definitely think that burnout can come up in many forms of like senior year, but also with the fact of how people are receiving the information that we give, or just responses from our work.
100%. To kind of echo what you said, I think the biggest, I guess, source of burnout for me comes from the feeling of hopelessness sometimes. I think that, like for example, this past year, I worked with a senator in the state of Georgia to introduce a student mental health days bill, and the bill ended up getting stuck in committee, and because of kind of like the polarization of the Georgia Senate this past year, it having conversations with senators and seeing some of them turn an issue such as mental health, which to me is not a partisan issue. It's an issue of humanity, right? And seeing them turn that into a partisan issue. And even hearing one senator say, um with this bill, it's just a way for it's just a way for this party to gain brownie points in the upcoming midterm election. It kind of like brought a feeling of hopelessness within me of like, some people are leveraging things that are so important to students and their humanity, and leveraging them as if it's just, another item on their fight for power. And for a while I started to feel kind of like burnt out, and I started to kind of like slow down the momentum with a lot of the legislative policy work that I was doing. But I think, to further on echo what Obe was saying, I think to combat burnout, I look towards the qualitative parts of my advocacy work that just keep me going. After a knowledge and powers workshop, being able to work hands-on with immigrant children within my community, that I remember what it was like feeling in their shoes and feeling just so lost in a new environment. But, being able to laugh with them and, kind of serve as a mentor towards them always lets me know that, we'll often have failures within our battles and we'll have setbacks, but the fact that you're able to impact at least one person and make a difference in their life, whether it's a small difference or a large difference, means just so much more than you as a person will ever know. And I think within my advocacy work, I'm guided by two phrases. The first one being, the world is my oyster. You have so many opportunities that you're going to be able to go towards, and nothing is stopping you from, or you shouldn't feel stopped from using your voice to impact others and to advocate for things that matter to you. But also to kind of flip the phrase, my oyster is the world. The pearls that you encounter throughout the path of advocating for others and the people that you work with on your path are so important. And hold on to the stories and the people that you work with and use them to remind you about what's important. Yeah.
I would say for me, burnout is really common. Just living in Texas, it feels like literally every day something new is happening. And, I spent quite a few months always calling not even just my representatives, but other representatives that I knew who were really big in education about the voucher program here in Texas. When that essentially passed after I believe after the 2024 election, it was because vouchers had been going on forever. Greg Abbott and a lot of Republicans actually worked to get those Republicans who sided with Democrats and not passing it unseated. So they worked against their own just so they could try and pass this plan. I remember feeling very hopeless at that point because, my school district has millions of dollars in deficit, and we don't know how we're going to get out of that hole. We're spending money we don't have. And I know it's not just my high school, it's almost every single high school in the state of Texas. Um, so there is always a sense of hopelessness. However, I would say for us, a big thing for us right now is kind of this isn't really advocacy, but like our hope in candidates. James Tellerico is an excellent candidate. I've been a big supporter of him when he was in the state house. I met him when he was in the state house because of the voucher program. He was a really big advocate against it. And so when he ran for Senate, I was like, I'm all in. Like, he's such a great candidate. And he's right now beating two major Republicans in the state Senate, like in this election right now in the polls. Um, and it's not a huge significant margin, but I do think there's something special in Texas. And so when I feel that burnout of, I feel like every single day Republicans in the state are kind of beating down on us, that there is hope that we can elect Democrats. And it's not just, oh, it's Texas, so it doesn't matter. They're always going to be red because that's not true. We have candidates who are truly appealing to the issues that we care about. Tellerico just launched an ad talking about gas prices, which in Texas is really not super great right now. I was driving home today and it's almost at $4, which I've never seen before. And so it definitely is something that like he's focusing on the issues of Texans, which is really bringing us like hope in a way. So I do think it really is important to remember that even if it seems dark, that there's always light at the end of the tunnel. As Martin Luther King Jr. said, I believe, the arc of the universe is long, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it always stretches towards justice. So I think I quoted that right. But it is definitely something that I hold dear to my heart. So I'm always looking for hope.
To be fully transparent, my burnout has stemmed from dealing with my chronic illness. So I've kind of had to take a break in order to even continue my advocacy work. And with that, I have to say that it's okay to take a break, no matter what your situation is, because at the end of the day, the issues are always going to be there. Like, this isn't unwavering battle, unfortunately. So don't feel like you have to be anybody's savior or that you always have to be there, because in order to, what fuels this work is being able to be well rested and taking care of yourself and all that. And I think that's what's that's what I've been able to do in order to get myself out of that hole of burnout. And yeah, just dealing with that and just having to remind myself that I don't have to be like, I'm not the only person in this fight. So I'm able to take a break, and so can everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, burnout is a very real challenge, and I've definitely struggled with it. And I think the biggest way that it has appeared is when I feel like I want to try to solve like everything at once. And I think because there are so many different things that I'm passionate about, I've always been drawn to get involved in a bunch of things and always, um, yeah, try to put in my best effort and try to do everything. And I think a lot of that just leads to burnout because there's so many things that are on your plate and it's much more than you can handle. And I think, especially being a student, you have to figure out like, some what to prioritize. And a lot of times it's been difficult to prioritize both school and so like the important advocacy work that you're doing. So I think burnout has really manifested in that way of just wanting to do so many things and just not being able to do them. But I think what's really kept me going throughout these years is just the people that I'm with. And it's just so amazing that I have friends and peers who are so energized and empowered to do this work. And sometimes when I'm feeling down or hopeless, I look to them and I see that they're not giving up and they're continuing to fight. And that is just so amazing to see. And these are the people who I want to be with and who I want to be working with. So I think to any peers or anyone out there who is feeling unmotivated and is feeling burnout, I would say look to your peers, look to your friends, and really try to get that energy from them and really feel energized with what they're doing. Because I think it's so important that as young people, especially, that we stand together and we know that we're all in this work together. And I think just that is super helpful and, really combating that burnout that makes a lot of us feel hopeless.
All right, thank you guys. So I think we're gonna have time for one, maybe two more questions. On these last two, it is okay if not everyone wants to speak. If you want to speak, please raise your hand, just so that we can try to get a couple more things. So one other question I had for you guys is if you could redirect the progressive movement towards one issue youth care deeply about, but feel is being overlooked right now, what would that be?
Can you replace the question? Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time, Suravi, please?
Of course. So, if you could redirect the progressive movement toward one issue that youth care deeply about but feel is being overlooked, what would that issue be?
May I
And
answer
you can
briefly,
like,
Dom? 'Cause I saw
yeah,
that you
sorry.
raised your hand.
Sorry, yeah, just what I'm saying, like raise your hand. Feel free to raise it like physically if that's easiest for you.
Oh, okay. So then, Dom, you go ahead.
Okay, yeah. I would say right now the United States is undergoing such a huge empathy crisis. And I think the way that I think it's felt across youth a lot. I think that the reason why we're having so much political polarization, we're not able to really, I guess, have effective political discourse within the United States, or, I guess, like within this current political climate, is because I think we're not considering the lived experiences of others enough when we're trying to talk to them about issues that are important to us. Or we, I guess, like, take people and dehumanize them um it, to labels. I live in the rural South, right? And I think that something that I've seen a lot is there oftentimes, there'll be times in which, like, um, individuals here are just like reduced to being like, just stupid rednecks who, only believe in like a certain um sorry, like, they're just like, they're humanized to being just like stupid rednecks, right? And I think that whenever we take people and strip them down to labels, we are less likely in having them in building coalition and community with them, right? So I think that within the progressive movement, a way to be able to, you know include others more and have them maybe consider their own perspectives more, is starting with considering their lived experiences, and taking them into account as, we discuss with them important issues.
I'll go on to Karyleni and then Obe.
If I were to redirect the progressive movement towards one issue, it'd be addressing the deeply entrenched racial inequities in our system. I think that in order to even make progress as a progressive movement and as a nation, we have to address what got us here to begin with. Racial inequities is why the educational system is struggling. It is why some students cannot afford a quality education. And the healthcare system, that is the reason why some folks cannot receive a quality healthcare either. There's so many things that are interconnected with racial injustices, and we absolutely cannot ignore that because it's so deeply entrenched into our foundational documents, into our governmental systems, that we truly cannot make progress without addressing that.
Thank you. I really agree with Dom and Karyleni's points. The very systematic racism is very deeply rooted in this country, and I feel like many people don't even understand how deeply rooted it is. Obviously, from the 1800s, the 1900s, and even now, many people don't understand. I want to go back to Dom's point though about political polarization. Recently this year, I did a research project in my AP research class that focused on how like the reliance of social media affects governmental distrust, and most of the participants though were around like my area though, but it made me realize how deeply this political polarization goes even for like us teenagers, and that we view that there is one side or the other, but there's also many different nuanced takes that many people don't seem to understand. And as Don mentioned, if we're just looking at one person and we're saying that, oh, they're this and giving them this certain label, we're not having the opportunity to have a actual discussion with them and being able to understand their side and actually being able to educate, because being able to educate other people is a very powerful experience or a powerful tool. Like being able to be able to talk to someone and hear their side, because we do not understand or know where they're coming this with these political ideologies. Is it from their parents? Is it from somewhere else? Is it from social media? Especially just going into like a regular social media comment section. And as I believe Kate mentioned before, many people are getting, or teenagers as of now, even with my research, many of teenagers are getting their information from social media, and they're hearing it from one political side of the spectrum, and they're being feeded what they want to hear, and they're not being able to hear from other different perspectives. If people were able to hear from other different sides of the spectrum, but being able to hear what people's points are, these conversations would be more beneficial towards them, and actually being able to target what they're saying and being able to bring them to another place and actually critically think what they're saying and what people's lived experiences have been about.
I would say there's two for me. I would say one, I'm a big believer of the big tent. I feel like as progressives, we can't say we're going to go to the future and leave people behind. And that's one thing that, especially being in Texas, it really feels like if you focus only on the Democratic Party, you're never going to win. And so when we have this big tent mentality of like trying as hard as we can to reach out, sometimes we're going to be rejected and told like, we don't believe anything you have to believe in. That's okay because at the end of the day, we've tried. But if we refuse to even try, we will never know. At the end of the day, we're all humans. We have more in common than we actually believe. We might have differences in how we want to address it, but if we don't reach out to everyone, we will never know. So I'm a big believer in Big Tent. And then I would say education, especially in Texas, I would say public education is under attack. The Texas Education Agency is partisan. It was put in place by one of Greg Abbott's friends who has completely restructured how Texas education is. Again, I'm the daughter of an educator. I've definitely experienced firsthand how it has impacted our schools. We've been robbed of funding. Um, we do have a policy and an act called Robin Hood, which in theory is great. It takes money from higher incoming schools, the tax property money that we get, and redistribute it to Title I. However, my school district, I know since the enactment of it, has lost over, I believe, $100 million in funding that we could have used, and now we're in a deficit. So it is like, even though it's good intentioned, we have to look back at it, but nobody is willing to do so. And if we destroy public education, that directly harms progressive ideologies and the Democratic Party. Statistically speaking, Democrats and those on the left receive a higher education. And I think it's intentional. I think that a lot of people on the right want to see the destruction of public education in order to increase voter turnout. And I think it is effective in Texas at this point. And so if we refuse to acknowledge education, it's one of the most attacked groups. We've seen it with DEI and firing teachers. We've definitely seen this. And so if we leave education behind, we are not going to be able to progress as a society.
Bhavika, go ahead.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Yeah, I'll be brief, but I just want to echo what everyone says because I think it's so powerful and so impactful. And I think I definitely agree with like addressing like systematic racism and how deeply enrooted it is in our system. And I also think that human rights is such a fundamental issue in our country and just across the globe that is has been overlooked through like for so long and is continuing to be overlooked. And I think like we can't even move forward if we don't see each other as equals. And I think like just drawing on my personal experiences, and I think like social media is also a really big thing. I've noticed that like there are people who seriously believe that they're superior to someone else just because of where they come from or like who they are or how much wealth they have. And I think it's absolutely crazy. So I think just addressing this like social hierarchy and understanding that no one is superior to someone else is such a big issue that we need to address to ensure that we're even able to make progress and actually support other people. Because as humans, if we don't see other, just like the dehumanization of other people is absolutely crazy to me. And I think that is so, so crucial to address.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing. Very quickly before we move on to our next part of the evening, which is a Q&A, I just really want to let our audience who is looking at us know that um, the way that some of Dom's points and some of the other points were about the bipartisan cooperation um, of the people in this group in this panel, 5 of us met through a program that was intended to promote bipartisan cooperation across our country by introducing young people to one another so that they could get to know each other more. So absolutely, like the fact that our coalition and group of young people here was built for that reason and for that purpose of connecting young people really, strikes a chord with me that's something that should be valuable. But I digress. We're going to be moving on to the audience Q&A portion of our panel. And if we have some time later, I have a few more questions that I can ask. But for now, I definitely want to open it up to our lovely audience to ask any questions or comments that they might have, and get to know a little bit more about our panelists. So I feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat, where our lovely moderators, Melanie and John, will take a look at them and we'll make sure that we can answer as many questions as we can in the next 20 or so minutes. So the first question that we have is from Daniel, who asked, what challenges have you had to enlist your peers? So again, just so we can try to get through as many questions as possible, we'll not everyone has to answer a question, but if you would like to, please raise your hand physically or using the little reaction button, and I will call on you. So again, the question is, what challenges have you had to enlist your peers in your advocacy efforts? Bhavika?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest challenge I've had is other youth feeling like they're not able to make any change. And I think I definitely understand that because when I was younger, I definitely felt the same way. But I think, yeah, that definitely has been the biggest challenge because whenever I share my advocacy work with others, I think a lot of times they are very impressed and very shocked. But I think there's also a part or like some people who just um, don't really feel like they can get involved and they don't really feel like that's for them and that it's only for a certain group of people. And I think I have resonated with that in the past. And I think, especially with, for example, with climate work in Somerville, I've noticed that a lot of climate spaces were dominated by white and wealthier individuals. And I think that made me feel out of place at times. And it really made me question, like maybe this is the type of work, maybe this type of work isn't for me, and people like me don't really get involved in this type of work. So I think just trying to address that and make sure that everyone feels like they can be involved and that any type of advocacy work is for anyone is really important.
Obe, go ahead. I know you had a comment to add.
Yes, thank you. I feel like one of the challenges, I think, as mentioned before by Bhatia, like I think a lot of people like think that they're too young or they're too small to be able to participate. I'm involved in like so much like things and ranging from many different things from diversity to like drug abuse or the Black maternal mortality wealth and healthcare, that many different issues come up when I'm speaking for different things. I know with the drug abuse one, a lot of people aren't really interested because they don't want to like go against something that maybe they have personal history with and they don't feel comfortable being able to open up about their experiences. I know with the diversity part, a lot of the people, especially when I'm talking to people who are just non-POC, they don't feel necessarily comfortable in going into a space. I know many people might not feel comfortable going to a space that talks about diversity. I feel though that with these like issues though, it's a challenge if you don't personally like be able to relate. But even if you do not like personally relate to any of these problems or issues, I always like remind them like, hey, you're starting from somewhere. Like even if you do not have that personal connection, you've seen how it has affected your friends, your families, even not that, but even the nation or other people. Like being able to attest to know what is going on with like other people is still a way for you to be able to advocate and still be able to be a part of it, whether you relate to those issues or not.
Absolutely. Or do any other panelists have anything that they would like to add, or we can move on to the next question? All right. Okay, our next question is from our amazing moderator, Melanie, who's asking, the older generations, whether in the media or in advocacy circles, have asked where youth are in the big protests. Do all of you panelists think that youth are missing, or do you think that youth advocacy will look different than what adult supporters might think? If so, what does this generation's idea of major advocacy or actions look like? Okay, go ahead.
I think when if I'm answering the question correctly, let me know, but I think major advocacy for like a lot of people, I think would be like going out to protest, talking to the people in the state house or stuff like that. I think maybe people see as major advocacy. And I know with teens regarding that, a lot of people don't feel comfortable going out to go do things, like especially when we're in a time where people, I mean, in my personal opinion, from the way the media has been portraying certain things, that it seems as though protests are meant to be violent or protests are meant to be this. Well, no, in reality, protests are peaceful. Protests are ways to show what you believe in, what you're talking about. And I think though that yes, I think a little bit youth isn't really seen in these protests, but there's definitely youth doing other things than major protests. Whether it's like as Kate said, like calling their senators or creating all these chapters in their own like different schools. I think this is where because what I realized going on is that like major advocacy doesn't have to come from going on the spotlight or doing what maybe adults seem, but even like starting at your own group in your own school, having a weekly meeting or two to discuss the issues that you feel part is in a way advocacy. Being able to get people from school, because school is a community, and having that set of a community in school and being able to garner more students in that said community into these smaller groups to have these discussions is a way of advocacy and letting people know like, hey, this is what's going on and this is our solutions and what are other ways that we can then go outside of school and then able to get more people or students. I feel like that is definitely a more popular way of how us youth are becoming more involved in this advocacy work.
Yeah, I think that youth advocacy has become a bit fragmented for two main reasons. The first one being us living in a very post-COVID world. I think that our generation is still getting accustomed to being outside and I guess like touching grass. And I think that I think that that's one of the bigger reasons as to why within these protests, we see we kind of see less of like Gen Z being present because they're still tr I guess trying to get used to physical forms of advocacy when throughout the Black Lives Matter movement happened during the COVID pandemic, and that's when we really started to see a huge shift to digital advocacy, through using like hashtags and media campaigns to advocate for things. So I think the transition back to um physical protests has been a bit difficult to streamline. And I think the second, I guess, like setback with youth advocacy nowadays in physical forms has definitely been the repercussions that youth have been getting for being involved in protests and advocacy. Like we're seeing universities like Columbia University and like students at Columbia University getting their degrees taken away and getting arrested by police officers or being targeted by law enforcement for using their voice to advocate for issues that are important to them. And students across the United States are starting to kind of feel a little bit worried that it's dangerous for them to use their voice because of a lot of the setbacks, whether it's like funding cuts or the use of law enforcement. And I think throughout like history, law enforcement has always been used to intimidate young voices in protests. But I think the reason as to why the engagement is starting to dwindle more is because there's not only the transition back to to the post-COVID world, but also because of things now like your university degrees and future opportunities being kind of connected to that. But I think now we have to find a way to be able to encourage youth to not only get involved in more creative ways, but also to form community, to show and pressure our legislators and those in charge that we should not be punished for using our voices, and rather it's literally within our Constitution and on our First Amendment rights that we are able to use our voice. And, promoting that to not only the youth, but also to our legislators and making sure that they protect us when we do use our voice is just so critically important nowadays. But yeah.
I would also like to add kind of what John was saying about the youth and like kind of like social media. Um, I feel like in a way it's also kind of socially awkward to go to protests. I know that sounds so stupid, but I've definitely felt like going to a like teenagers going to a new space where they don't have any friends or don't know anyone is honestly probably one of the scariest things that they can feel. They'll be staring at their phones the whole time, and that's something that like I've definitely experienced. There have been rallies where I've like, oh, I want to go, but none of my friends are able to, and then I just don't end up going because I don't want to go by myself. And actually, one of the rallies that I did attend of James Tellerico here in Austin, one of the reasons that I actually fully went was because my friend Lola decided to go with me. And so it's definitely, as stupid as it sounds, I think teenagers yearn and want a community. And if we don't provide that, they're not going to show up. And so definitely the youth need to become more engaged in politics as a community. But it is something that definitely is an issue.
Absolutely, Kate. Thank you so much. So one of the next questions we have from Kate is, how can adults better support youth and youth activism? Kate, go ahead.
I would say ensuring that our opinions are heard. I feel like a lot of issues that we face, we definitely feel aren't treated seriously. Obviously issues like gun violence are taken seriously, but at the end of the day, like it really has become kind of dismissed. Like every time one happens, we take a pause back, thoughts and prayers, and move on. And so I feel like the youth just doesn't feel heard because we've come and expressed the fears that we feel in school, and our policymakers do nothing to change that. And so we've grown up in a way that like our concerns, our fears, wanting a better education, wanting to feel safe while we're at school. We don't feel heard. And when people don't feel heard for a very long time, they feel they don't have a voice. And after they feel they don't have a voice, they don't express themselves. So until like lawmakers actually take us seriously or take our concerns seriously, I feel like there is a less activity to be taken. But I think that groups such organizing groups like when they listen to our voices, we feel more empowered to join those groups. I would say a really great example of this would be March for Our Lives. It was a group entirely created by teenagers, essentially for teenagers, and then it expanded from there. And so I feel like actually listening to our voices and opinions and making it a centerpiece of your organization is probably one of the most effective ways to encourage youth to engage.
Thank you, Kate. And we're gonna go with Karyleni first and then Dominic afterwards.
Okay, I had lowered my hand because Kate kind of touched what I said I was going to say at the end, but I'm just going to say simply, well, it's one of the simplest, but also one of the hardest things that you can do is just create space. I think adults, a lot of the times, especially in policy spaces, like to be the biggest one in the room. They want to take up all the authority. And what I would suggest is to share some of that because at the end of the day, it would just benefit all of us.
Yeah, 100%. I think that to to go back to what Kate was saying, I think one of the ways in which adults can kind of show that they're involved in our processes is to, I guess or like organize and work with us more and show that they're taking the steps to work with us because I think something that I've seen recently in by policymakers is that they will enact policies that kind of give the vibe of like, oh, like this will benefit me. And then when I'm, no longer on the earth, like you guys are left to, work this out on your own, And it's just like, you know, we are the next generation, right? And we are actively trying to build our future and, build spaces for us to be able to cultivate the world. And I think a lot more intentionality in wanting to cultivate the next generation could be something that would make youth feel more heard. So whether that's through, getting in, finding out ways to like get involved and support youth-led and youth-based movements, or just I guess something even as small as like words of encouragement and support from adults could definitely go a long way in having us feel heard and supported for sure.
Definitely. We're gonna do Bhavika next and then end off with Obe. Bhavika, can you hear us? I think she might be frozen. So, okay, wait, Bhavika, do you want to go?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. My internet just
No
disconnected.
worries.
But yeah, I think I want to address this question for youth groups specifically. And I think the biggest thing that I've seen is adults finding a balance between support, like supporting in people and empowering them. And I think that is something that's so difficult to do. And I've been a part of several like youth organizations with an adult advisor, and they have all been very different. And I think I draw back a lot of my answer to this question from a specific experience I've had where it felt like the group was being completely led by the adults, and youth were just like there was just like a token youth member that all organizations need to show that they're including all different ages. And I think that was such an interesting experience to have because although there was representation of young people, it didn't really feel like we were actually being represented. So I think, which honestly it's really difficult to do, but having adults find that balance between, yes, we want to support young people because, there are some things that we aren't able to do, and just considering our time limits and like our limitations with how we spend our time specifically, and just everything that we have to balance, I think it is very useful to have some support from adults. But I think just understanding that sometimes that there can be too much support and too much, and adults doing too much is something that is very important to better support youth and youth activism, and actually making sure that the young people are the ones leading the activism, and that rather than there being like an equal balance between like adults and youth, I think that youth should really be prioritized and they should be the main ones in groups like this. Yeah, and that's my answer. Thank you.
All right, next we've got Obe. I think might need to be spotlighted again, if that's possible. There we go. All right, yeah, take it away, Obe.
Thank you. I think my internet went off a little bit. But yeah, just as like everyone mentioned, I do believe something also to add, if not already said, though, is obviously, as mentioned, being said, like having that space for teenagers or just youth in general to like speak. I think a lot of things also is like making sure that you're treating them like just a regular person with thoughts and ideas. I've know with like a personal experience that many people just view teens as like someone like learning up to the step. As Dom said, we are the next generation. And so being able to have that comfortability with many other people and like just being able to be treated like a regular person, not just see us as a youth or like as kids or whatever, but see us as someone who has potential to do like even more great things. Another thing I'd also add is like, as mentioned before in the last topic, is in many different forms of activism that youth are participating in with the rise of like obviously social media and then all these access and all these other things that youth can participate in, also is recognizing the many different patterns of advocating and understanding that teens may not want to like protest or teens may not want to do the traditional ways, but understanding that maybe they are on social media doing something, having all these like little, obviously like this, like a panel or something like that. These are all forms of having advocacy, and being able to understand those different forms is also beneficial towards the cause in general and understanding today's youth activism.
Absolutely, guys. And also, like, I definitely want to echo what Bhavika was saying because, yeah, like there's definitely been spaces where I was told, like, yes, this is like a youth space, but then nobody cares what I'm saying. So, totally understand. Thank you all so much for sharing. All right, I think we have time for one more question, which is I also from Kate, which is that she has heard a lot of comments about social media and polarization. What policies regarding social media do you all think would be helpful? Kate, go ahead.
I feel like social media is definitely a different kind of beast that we haven't figured out yet. I know a lot of countries are banning social media for people under 18. I know Australia's done it. I don't think that's the way. I think we become a society so focused on social media and so centered around it that taking it away at this point will do more damage than good. And it actually might even cause resentment because I feel like even though I'm about to be an adult, like if I was a 16-year-old and a bunch of politicians took away my access, I'd be so mad. And it's not even really that effective. I know like there was just a report in Australia of children being able to find loopholes. So it's not even an effective way. My AP seminar class, I actually did a research kind of esque project on this about how social media connects to conspiracy theories online, specifically with like QAnon and right-wing conspiracy theories. And I would say that kind of my solution was media literacy. I think that this is something that could occur in schools. I've definitely had some media literacy education about what is a good source, what is a bad source, but kind of advocating to expand that is probably the best thing that we can do because once we actually understand how to interact with social media, then we'll be able to actually step into the role of advocacy with a full understanding of what's going on.
Totally. Next we'll have Dom and then Obey.
I think that something that I've seen on social media, that's kind of worried me is politicians using artificial intelligence to propagate agenda. I've seen personally in Georgia, the midterm elections are coming up, and in the Republican primary for the Senate seat, I think there's a politician named Buddy Carter. He's either a Georgia state representative or a U.S. House representative. I forgot, but he's running to get the Republican nomination to be the Republican candidate for the Senate, and he made an AI image of John Ossoff in a sombrero hat. And essentially he was, making fun of like John Ossoff's immigration policy and just like propagating the most racist like agenda ever. And it's not just that, we have our own president making AI images and posting them on Truth Social. And I think it's getting kind of worrying because as AI advances and becomes so ultra realistic, there are people who oftentimes cannot tell what is real and what is not, Um, I think I like to tell myself that I'm pretty good at detecting when something is AI and when something is not AI. But there are times when I'll genuinely get like tripped up on, a video of somebody speaking and I'll think like, wait, is it like this is AI? And I think it's so important that there's regulations around this, especially in political races. And with how scandalous and messy a lot of political races are getting, I'm really worried about how the use of AI is gonna be, especially when, this past elections, the past election cycle, there were literally AI generated voice calls of, President Joe Biden telling his own, like, telling the American people not to go vote. So there definitely needs to be honesty regulations around that, 100%.
Yeah, so Dom actually just touched like completely what I was going to talk about, but I'll add a little bit about my 2 cents in there because I feel like though you can't really do much policies on like social media in general. Like social media will be here; it'll continue to be here. The issue though that we do have is AI regulation. AI is a whole entire mess. I mean, not on just fact politically, but also in like community wise. I definitely believe that there should be some sorts of like regulation, especially with AI because I remember there was a case nearby where there was a student who created inappropriate artificial images of another student, a minor, which is just disgusting to me. And it's the fact that they were spreading these images around the school and around social media, and then the only thing they really did for that kid was just give him a slight detention because there was no rules or anything concerning it. Because then it comes to the fact that, oh, we're going to punish a student because they created a little silly image, a little silly AI image of like a teacher as an animal, or you're going to actually punish a student because they created an inappropriate image of a student. And because of that, AI is just becoming like completely out of hand. And as Don mentioned before, no one can like tell the difference. Like I even myself, I think I'm a really great AI detector, but even with that, it's getting harder and harder and having to look at little details to make sure that something isn't real. And with that, I think moving on though, there should be serious AI regulations, especially though. And also it's weird as even seeing like Donald Trump posting AI images, then claiming that he didn't know what it was or posting racist videos with the end as like Michelle Obama and Barack Obama as monkeys at the end and saying that, oh, he didn't see the video. It's just disgusting that we're promoting this use of like AI in here with harmful rhetorics. And then we're continuing to do that. And it's going to get worse and worse and worse even more if we do not create these regulations right now.
All right. Does anyone have any other final thoughts to add? No. All right. Thank you all so much for taking the time to be here today. Thank you for like sharing all of your thoughts and opinions. I know it can be hard, especially as young people, to speak in a group of adults and feel like, oh, can I share what I really think? So I really value you all taking the time to be here, especially the week before AP exams start. So thank you. And also thank you to everyone who took the time out of their schedule to be here today. I know that it's hard on a Saturday afternoon. So we absolutely appreciate it. And we really valued, especially those questions that you asked, because they made our conversation so much richer. So with that, I'm gonna close it off for this afternoon and hand over the mic to John. But I'm so grateful to have gotten to know more about all of you and to have been in the space with all of you today. Thank you.
Awesome. I'll just note my final words. People have already been doing it, but can we have a round of Zoom applause for our facilitator and our wonderful panelists this afternoon? I thought this was just a great discussion. So you organized it really well, kept the discussion going, and was super impressed by the kind of wealth of insights, advocacy that you've all already been doing, and all of the work that will soon be soon be to come, and what you all will be continue to be doing across a range of important issues. And glad to have some of you who aren't already in Massachusetts coming up to Massachusetts for school as well. So again, thank you again. As noted, we have been recording this, so if you attended, if you're a panelist, you will be getting the recording of it so you can share it with other people because it's a great thing both to inspire people's future advocacy and as well as to inform people's advocacy. Uh, Thank you to everybody joining. And with that, I'll formally close out the Zoom and say enjoy the rest of your Saturday.